Good evening. My name is Michael Jaluli, and as part of my Biology 235 course, I am to create a video indicating the appendicular skeleton and answers questions regarding certain bones, such as the opening and/or functions. We'll start with the pectoral girdle and the two bones that make up the pectoral girdle, that being the scapula and the clavicle being right here, and our scapula being right over here. The pectoral girdle or shoulder girdle is a set of two bones which connects the upper limb and the axial skeleton on each side. The pectoral girdle consists of three joints: the sternoclavicular joint, the acromioclavicular joint, and the glenohumeral joint. The scapula is connected by the clavicle and humerus by acromioclavicular and glenohumeral joints, respectively. The upper limb and pectoral girdle are connected to the axial skeleton only through the sternoclavicular joint. Scapula does not make any anatomical joint with the axial skeleton, rather connected to the vertebral column and thorax only by the muscles. This connection of scapula with the thorax is sometimes referred to as the conceptual scapula-thorax joint or physiological scapula-thorax joint. Thus, the extremely mobile pectoral girdle is supported and stabilized by the muscles that are attached to the ribs, sternum, and vertebrae. Moving on to the pectoral girdle, bones that make up the pectoral girdle are the sacrum, the coccyx, and the hip bones. If we look at the skeleton, we will see that we have here our sacrum listed right here where my pencil is. We have the coccyx right here, the lower portion of it, and we also have the two hip bones, the ilium, ischium, and the pubic bones here and here. The names of the joints include the sacroiliac joints, the posterolaterally right and left joints, the symphysis pubis joints, and the lumbrosical joints. The clavicle and anatomical end of the sternal end of the clavicle. We have the clavicle, as I noted earlier, right here. The acromial end is closest to the shoulder, that being right here. And then over on this side, we have the sternal end, which is closest to the sternum. Again, our clavicle listed right here. Looking closer into the scapula, we have our conroid process, which is indicated right here. You can see that. Right here is our conroid process. Our subscapular fossa is behind here, subscapular fossa. We also have our glenoid cavity. The glenoid cavity would be right here. You can kind of see the depression or the cavity, if you will, that is adjacent to the conroid process, that being the glenoid cavity. The spine would be right here, this being our spine. Our acromion, again, listed right here. Acromion right here, adjacent to the spine. We also have our supraspinatus fossa. Supraspinatus fossa being over here. Supraspinatus fossa, right where the tip of my pencil is at. We have the infraspinous fossa. Infraspinous fossa being right here. We have the sternoclavicular joint. Sternoclavicular joint is going to be over on this end, on the sternal end of the clavicle, and the last portion of the clavicle, or the acroclavicular joint, is right here. Hence the name acromyoclavicular joint. Moving on to the arm, we have our humerus bone. Humerus bone is going to be indicated right here. Right here is our humerus bone. This big thick bone here. The head would be indicated right over here. here is the head of the humerus bone. We have the greater tubercle being on the outer portion of the humerus bone, and we have the lesser tubercle just inside of it, right here where my middle finger is at. We also have the deltoid tuberosity. The deltoid tuberosity is going to be shown right here, deltoid tuberosity. Moving on to the medial epicondyle. Medial epicondyle is going to be indicated here. We've got a lot of different depressions and bones in this section here. So again, our medial epicondyle is here. We also have our lateral epicondyle on the opposite side. On this end here, we have our conoid fossa being adjacent to it, and it's a small depression in the distal dorsal surface of the humerus that receives the conoid process of the ulna when the forearm is flexed. We have the capitellum. The capitellum is right over here, and the capitellum is the head of the radius that articulates with the capitellum. The trochlea is right over here, down at the further bottom end of it, or most distal part of the humerus. And again, the trochlea, the conoid process articulates with the trochlea. And lastly, we have our olecranian fossa. Olecranian fossa is right here, this depression right here. Again, real distal part of the humerus bone. But the olecranian fossa, or process rather, articulates with the olecranian fossa. Moving on to the forearm, we have the ulna right over here. We have the conoid process right up here, conoid process, and we have the styloid process, which is indicated right down here. Styloid process of the forearm, or the ulna bone. The radius is again the bone adjacent to it. This would be the radius bone. The head of the radius bone, of course, is going to be down here. Down here is the head of the radius bone. The radial tuberosity, right up here, radial tuberosity, and the styloid process is indicated right over here. Styloid process. Moving on to the carpus, if we have the proximal row, we have the, and I'll try to do this as best I can. If you can see this here, we have our scaphoid right here, our scaphoid right here. We also have our lunate right here. That's our lunate. We have the triquetral right here adjacent to it. We have the pisiform right here. Pisiform right there. Moving on to the distal row, we have the trapezium right here. We have the trapezoid adjacent to it, and we have the capitate right here, and then we have the hamate adjacent to it, or above it, right here. The bones that joint with the forearm, the wrist is a complex joint that bridges the hand of the forearm. It is actually a collection of multiple bones and joints. The bones comprising the wrist include the distal end and the radius and ulna, 8 carpal bones, and the proximal portions of the 5 metacarpal bones. The coxal bones. The coxal bone is actually 3 separate bones that fuse together as a person grows from a child into adulthood. These three pieces are called the ilium, ischium, and pubis. They all actually fuse or joint into one large bone by the time a person reaches 20 or 25 years of age. The ilium forms the upper element of the coxal bone with the crust-like structure at the uppermost part. A person putting his or her hands on his or her hips can actually feel the crust of the ilium. The ischium is the back of the part of the acetabulum and is one of the bones a person sits on. The pubis is located in the front and forms the frontal part of the acetabulum opening, and as well as offering protective coverage to the organs in the pubic area. The acetabulum, you can see here, is shown here. This again being the acetabulum. We have the pubic symphysis being right here. We also have the obtubular foramen is this big gaping hole right here. The iliac crest is actually right up here, this being the iliac crest. Right here is our iliac crest. We also have the iliac fossa. The iliac fossa being this piece right here, iliac fossa. The greater scachic notch is this here. Okay. We also have the ischial spine just below it, right here. And we have the ischial tuberosity being right here. The femur, moving on to the leg, we have our femur, and the head of the femur is right here, this being the head of the femur. We also have the greater trochlear being right here. Right here is the greater trochlear. The lesser trochlear is right here. We have our adductor tubercle. Adductor tubercle is down here. This is our adductor tubercle. The medial epicondyle is going to be right here, and the lateral epicondyle is over here on the opposite side. The medial and lateral condyles are here and over here. The patella is obviously this piece right here, this being our patella. The femur, the head of the femur is going to be what we just discussed. The tibia, medial and lateral parts of the condyle are going to be here and here. We also have our tibia tuberosity going to be right in the front here, and the medial malleolus is over here, down at the bottom. Medial malleolus right here. Proximal and distal tibifibular joints are right in here where the joint meets the tibia. Moving on to the tarsal. What makes the bone articulate with the tarsus is the ankle joint through the articulations with the lateral and medial malleoli of the two bones of the lower leg, the tibia and the fibula. Within the tarsus, it articulates with the calcaneus below and navicular in front with the talcalveolar joint. Sorry, that was probably worse than you've seen, but that is how the tarsus is created. The tarsus, if you will, is this region down here, this being the tarsus here. We also have the calcaneus being in the back here. Calcaneus. The cuboid is right over here. Excuse me. Right here is our cuboid, and the navicular. Navicular is going to be this right here. This being our navicular bone. We also have the medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiform bones, and those are going to be here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to see upside down. Here being our medial, intermediate, and lateral cuneiform bones. And then lastly, we have the metacarpals and the phalanges. We have the first set of phalanges here. I have them labeled as A, B, C, D, and E. And then phalanges down here. Metatarsals, and metatarsals are up here. The phalanges down here, and then we have our hallux, which is the last bone here on the big toe. And that concludes my video.